I know I got one of these fancy polls in here. It says, how can historical and contextual data inform your process? So for those of you that had the same vision test that I did earlier, so it's both can have an impact. Historical data is more helpful than contextual data, or the other way, contextual data is king, and pricing is too fluid these days anyway. Or are you kidding? COVID messed everything up, right? Or last but not least, one of the favorites in our office is I prefer to use my magic 8-ball because databases are hard. So I'll tell you, this is my first conference in almost 2 years. Am I the only one? How many other people, this is their first conference in a while? Yeah. I got some fancy new pants for this one. COVID's been helpful on my waistline. So I'm gonna try and have a little fun. It's Monday, it's early. I'm gonna talk about some estimating stuff that we've been doing at PARIC. Just a little about me, just so you have kind of some context of me. We're gonna talk a lot about context in my presentation. My background is as an architect, so I apologize ahead. I will try not to do anything too designy, but we are gonna talk a little bit about design, more in the context of how it informs the estimating pre-construction process, and more so how you're interacting with your teams and leveraging the technology that's kind of driving that. So I'm gonna spend a little time talking about how you get better information to and from your design team and how you can leverage that throughout that pre-construction process. So I guess some good fenders or some good bumpers to put on this conversation. Every project's a little different. And the type of estimate that you're going after, are you doing a hard bid or design build? Is it a self-performed job or not? I think that Greg touched on several aspects of this in his presentation. It's all that has an impact on what tools you use and when, what information you're going to use and when. And so with that, contextual information is really critical to what we're doing. The actionable insights aspects of this, there's data, but then there's more communication, how you're coordinating with your team, how you're working with them. And so if you can start to share some of the tools you're using with them, I think actionable insights kind of work in a bi-directional way. And then lastly, as Greg mentioned earlier, having everything in one place where everybody can access it, we're going to spend a little time talking about that. So highlighting this once more, so context is king. It's also highly dynamic. I promise I won't read every slide to you today. To me, as an architect growing up in that aspect of my career, understanding not only where the building was, but how we were going to go about building it, what made sense for the views and all that kind of stuff, but then who were we going to work with? What region of the country were we working in? What level of sophistication did the market have to support different workflows or different types of services? All that kind of stuff that has an impact on your price. And so as you get into the pre-construction process, a lot of different things come into play. And so I found this awesome little graphic about the St. Louis Wolves. Most of you are probably still too young to know that one, but nonetheless, it's the who, what, when, where, right? So I'm gonna build a new office building, a new high-rise, a new multifamily or senior living type project. How, the who, what, when, where of that project is gonna make a big impact on the approach we take and how we're gonna ultimately construct it, buy it out, and so on. So, kind of want to back off of this for just a second, but there's estimating software, which I love talking about estimating software, love talking about scheduling software, it's all great stuff. But at the end of the day, there's a bunch of other technology that we use. So, drones and a lot of other reality capture information help us bring that context into light. So, it's not just about the estimating piece itself, it's not just about the database of historical cost data, it's what other contextual information are we going to get into. And so, just by a quick show of hands, everybody in here is probably an Excel expert, right? Anybody in here not know Excel? All right, just want to make sure I was in good company. How many of you know Power BI? That's better than I thought. That's awesome. So they're saying 45 is the new 35, so I feel a lot better about my waistline. Power BI is like the new Excel, right? If you don't have somebody in your team that's playing with Power BI, getting curious about how they can use that to start looking at all this magnificent data we've started to develop and store, you're missing a huge opportunity there, because they're going to start to look at that data in different ways. I mean, I have some guys on our team that are doing things, and they'll just show up on a Tuesday morning and say, hey, check this out. I was playing with some data and started to see some other patterns, things I wasn't even thinking about. And the more we start to focus in on that type of innovation and creativity, the more we're getting out of the data that we're storing. It also is starting to drive some unexpected behaviors. How we structure data, you know, the last question we were going through is, how do you get more value out of the information, essentially? Well, if it's not standardized, you're never going to be able to round trip that data. And so if you start off in a project early and you put the estimate together a certain way, you put in a location breakdown structure and all that, and then it goes through that construction process where they make sausage out of your estimate, it's hard to unwind that at the end and really understand, how much did my concrete really cost? How much did my MEPs really cost? And so some of this innovation work we've been doing around using analytics to drive how we study the numbers has started to inform the guys, you know what, if we just broke down the estimate a little differently, if we just stayed on top of our ops team to make sure that they track these numbers all the way through, that makes that a heck of a lot easier on the back end to go, did we do good on that or not? You know, if it's self-performed, we generally have a much better feel, but if it's not, it gets a little fuzzier. So let's talk a little bit about contextual data again. So drones, I'm sure a lot of you have drones in your organization one way or the other. How many of you actually use drones in the early pre-construction process? Probably a few, but not all, right? This information is loaded with valuable data points. So you can measure it, you can do cut fill analysis, you can just get context of the site. Where is it in the world? How am I going to service it? How am I going to do deliveries? If you start to bring in the owners and the rest of the client team, have them inform you how you're going to build their project, right? So you're doing a senior living project on a large campus, for example. How are they going to get deliveries in? Where's their staff going to park? How are you going to be, putting them in a funky position throughout their construction process or your construction process? If they start to tell you you have to change your build plan because of the way they want to operate their campus, cost might go up, schedule might get elongated. All those things start to matter. So this data is great for the pre-con team, but it's also great for your client. It brings them along for the ride. Similar with laser scanning. So there's all kinds of projects in this world. Some are brand new, fresh construction on a beautiful, green, pristine site with perfect soil conditions. And then there's everything that we build, which is, it can be new construction, but it's never a perfect site. It's always a brownfield with all kinds of hidden gems, poor soils, some buried cars sometimes. I mean, you never know what you're going to get there. All those things matter. If it's an existing structure and you're going to go in and renovate it, in the St. Louis market, Kansas City market, we have a lot of old stock that's being converted into like loft apartments and studios. Having scan data from that early aspect of that project to share not only with the pre-con team, but the design team, and kind of partner up early, you're not making 55 different site visits, which is super helpful, but you can measure it. You can look at the photos. You can track that for historical tax credits and be a partner to your development team, right? It's not just about creating a model. In fact, to me, laser scanning is almost entirely not about building a model. It's about really investigating the project so that your team knows what they're getting themselves into, so that your subs know what they're getting themselves into. I mean, it's gotten to a point where this was kind of a luxury 10 years ago. Today, it's kind of becoming table stakes. If you're really going to work on a large 14 or 20 or 30-story building, go scan the thing. Save yourself having to huff up those steps on a building that's no longer got an operating elevator or ever had an elevator. Helmet cams. These are awesome, by the way. They look so stylish. I love wearing mine. I wear it at home. My wife thinks it's so cool. She doesn't. So, passive data collection. So, drones are great because you can throw them up in the sky, they'll scan 50 acres in 15 minutes or something, and you got data that you can measure. You throw it in ag tech or something like that, and you're getting, real earthwork information. The laser scanners are awesome, but time consuming, right? Like, you really got to commit to having that work done, and you got to convince your owner that they need that information early in the project. Always fun to try and do. This is as easy as it gets. Like, you literally can walk and chew bubble gum this is your technology, right? It's a very simplistic scan, but it's tons of photos. It's great documentation, again. This can help set baselines early in the project. It can help you understand what's going on in each space, whether that's a hotel room or a mechanical space or whatever. And I am driving towards something here, but with all this reality capture stuff, really what you're trying to do is just get more information available to the team so they can start digging in. So now let's dig in a little bit. So some of you probably seen this technology. This is TestFit.io. I'm not here to sell any software, but just because this is cool. So Clifton and his team have built a really, really awesome little product here where, you know, as an architect back in my day, I could spend hours sketching on a site plan, figuring out the setbacks, understanding what amount of parking I needed, how much green space I needed, you know, how much building could actually fit in that program on that site, and then I'd have to come up with 6 other options, right? Versus this thing, you can literally sketch on the site, and within 10 seconds, 20 seconds, you've got a complete design. You take that information, you do 6 of them in half an hour and get some coffee, and you kick out this little Excel file at the bottom, or you build an API, or you do whatever magic you want to do to connect them up. Now you're pricing at a conceptual level 6 options over coffee with your client. Like, that's a totally different way of doing it. You know, here, I would like to have a hotel, sir. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Or, you'd like to do a hotel? Well, let's go grab lunch, and we'll figure out a couple of performances for you, and we can get this project off center. I mean, it took me 20 minutes to learn how to use this software at a high level. It took me 4 hours to learn it, you know, good enough, where I can forget it and come back and relearn it again over and over and over. It's not a tool that I use all the time. It's not a team that our team uses all the time. But when we do use it, it's short, it's in a quick spurt, and the client's able to see it in real time. Now, it ultimately turns into like HGTV. How many of you guys ever watch HGTV and they renovate an entire house in 30 minutes? I love that. My wife tells me, we're going to renovate our bathroom, our master bathroom. It's only 5 years old. And I said, well, when are we going to do that? She goes, well, I thought we could, you know, do it maybe next weekend. Cool. I'm going to be sick that day, if that's okay with you. But I'll provide all the tools and the beer. So, I mean, I guess what I'm driving at here is it's the whole work smarter, not harder kind of thing. These tools are out there. How many people in here have ever used this tool or ever even heard of it? Okay, so that's like 4. And that was a very scientific measurement. Probably 4, right? If you haven't tried this tool, it's $500 a month. $500 a month for 5 seats. TestFit.io. So we take this tool, and with our great partners at BechTech, we round trip some of this data into their product, and we do a quick conceptual estimate, right? This is like a game changer. Like, this is like drones, right? Like, the first time I flew a drone and I got a whole site and it turned it into a 3D mesh and I was able to do site earthwork, it's like, holy shit, are you kidding me? Same thing with this. The first time I tried this and I showed it to somebody, I was like, you should just live and breathe this every day. It should be a part of what you do as a sales executive. It should be part of what you're doing as a pre-construction executive. All right, so I'm gonna move us forward. I get really excited about these kind of tools. So we talked a little bit about Power BI. So as Greg was saying earlier, so you've gone through all this energy to put together an estimate, and now you want to understand where the industry's at, or you're at the end of the project and we want to understand how you perform on the job, or you're sitting in front of a client, sketching on TestFit.io, and they go, well, what do you think it's going to cost for me to build my 6-story hotel building? Because, you know, we've had scope creep, because I said it was 3 stories earlier. Now we're at 6 stories, and now they want a parking structure, and they want to build it in the middle of winter, of course, because why not? So pulling up a dashboard like this where you could say, well, you know, as an industry professional, we started storing our data, and we're not 2 guys in a truck anymore. So what do we think it's going to cost, right? So there's all these cost indices out there that you can look at. But then what about your indices? You know, for us, what are PARIC's indices? What do we think it's going to cost to pour concrete? What do we think it's going to cost to frame the building? This is sophistication at a somewhat simplistic level. I mean, really, you're just taking your data and making it pretty, but you're also making it interactive. You're making the process of educating your client or working with your precon team more interactive. I'm a highly visual person. It's in my DNA because of my background, but not everybody looks at data the same way. The first time I looked at a trend line, I was like, oh, cool, Frank Gehry. But ultimately, that data is driving you towards a decision-making process, right? So why am I making this decision to buy this type of material or installing it at this time of year, or use this particular sub, or scope it out where I'm merging multiple things together? Why did I do that? There's a whole slew of decision-making things that come along with that process where that context is driving you in a direction. So having a database is great. Having a way to share that database with your team in real time and use it as a tool. This is not a presentation tool. And that's one of the things, I harp on this a little bit in our office, is we have all this great technology, but then we don't always use it to drive a meeting. It's like the exclamation mark at the end. Like, oh, look at this cool dashboard we built. Dashboards are tools. They are absolutely not presentation tools. They are working tools. Now, they look cool up here, but if you're in a meeting with a client, they don't want to see your Power BI dashboard at the end as kind of like the exclamation mark that, hey, I was here and I showed up. What's the value of this dashboard? I want to change the levels of the building. I want to change the footprint of the building. I want to change the parking. I want to change the level of quality or finish. I want to change my schedule. I want to be able to drag and drop a couple bars back and forth and have them see, when I move this, this popped out. When I move this up, this came in. Those types of changes, and they can start to see that causality and the cause effect going on. Now they're starting to understand why it happened. Otherwise, it's a number in the bottom right corner, as our friends at the table were talking about, that it's just a number. And they don't know how you got to that number. And it takes either years of trust or a whole lot of pages of an estimate, which to me is not the way to go. So taking this information and thinking about the life cycle of the project. So if you're doing a self-perform project, you're obviously going to go to a much greater level of detail in your estimate to understand, if I'm bidding everything out at a high level, I just want the number. Versus when you're actually going to take this into a self-perform routine, you're tracking every nut and bolt. You want to know everything about that project. You want to know your productivity rates and things like that. Setting up that estimate at the beginning so that you can track that all the way through allows you to actually see that data, which is great. But I'll back off this point just for a second. That's great for the people that want to do historical cost analysis. For the people that are running the self-perform teams, you have to find a way to make them care, because they are the ones that have to fill this information out. They have to do their timesheets. They actually have to track the work in place on a daily or weekly basis. The cadence of the updates here drives the productivity rates. So it doesn't do them any good to understand their productivity rate at the end of the job. They need to know, like, daily, at a minimum weekly, so they can adjust their teams. Do we need more people? Is weather impacting us? Can we not get materials fast enough? All the things that come into a construction life cycle. If they understand that in real time, now they're going to be more enticed to help you get this data, because without them, there is no you, is what I've learned anyway. So let's round trip this back to the teams. So as you're going through the design process and you're trying to connect the dots of, we understand the site conditions, we understand the way that we're going to contract this job, we understand how we're going to buy it out. Now we got to get into all the coordination aspects of a project and start to pull the team together. So I said earlier, you've got scan data. How do you get it to the teams? There's nothing better than putting it on a hard drive and having to give it with a courier, or these days, I don't even know how you do it, pigeon carriers or whatever, so that you actually get the data to them. So they need a 2 terabyte drive to get your scan data. It just doesn't make any sense. So what if you can connect the data to your estimate and the model and hand it off to them? So a way that we've approached this, and everybody does a little bit different, is I can give it to you on a hard drive. I can put it on a Dropbox account or Link or OneDrive or whatever. Or I can just put it in a PM tool, our single source of truth, and let you access it in real time. So the way we've approached this is we put our estimates, we put our schedule, we put all the reality capture data, all the drawings, all the models, everything. And we don't do this when we start construction. We do this when we start pre-construction, all the way at the beginning. So I don't know if you guys remember watching the bell curve for BIM, like everything's got to be front loaded and you put everything here, and then it kind of ski slopes down throughout the duration of the project. In the design world, that was like a big change. For precon, it feels like a bigger change. I don't know why. But getting everybody to structure that estimate early on, but more so getting the rest of this information and using it is a bigger struggle, it seems. So this has been a way that we've used this technology to say, okay, here's everything we know about this project right now, and you have unfettered access to it. You don't have to go to the building 55 times. You don't have to walk up and down a building that doesn't have stairs. You don't have to go and stand on a hilltop and try and guess the undulation on the site. You don't have to wait for a surveyor to come out and give you all the topographic information. We'll go do it for you. Our precon services are very focused on understanding the constraints of the project up front, providing that context to the project team up front, becoming partners with our designers up front, and giving them all the data that we have, because I can't do anything with this data by myself. I need them. So for us, we're looking at all the data now. So it's not just the estimate data, it's not just the schedule data, it's all the contextual data, and it's all is in close to real time as we can get it to you. So that way we're all making the same decisions together, and we know how we got there. And so with that, I'll kind of wrap up here with just one last slide, which is, I think Stuart mentioned earlier around having this life cycle approach to data. So if you're beginning with the end in mind, the beginning is all the way in that early pre-con phase, and it's all the way through and after construction. So having that conversation early with your project team that this is the way that you're going to approach your project, this is the level of data you're going to have, allows them to start to think a little bit differently about when are they going to make decisions? Who needs to be a part of that decision-making process? And ultimately, when you round trip the data, you have more context to say, how did I get to this number? This is how. It wasn't just an off occurrence. It was a very specific, thought out scenario. And when we finish that project up, we can say, did we do what we thought we were going to do? And we thought it was going to be $50 a square foot, and it was $50 a square foot? Or did we think it was going to be $50 a square foot, and we ended up at 110, and we didn't make any money? Because if we're not making any money, we're not going to get to do it again. And so to me, that's never the goal. Like, it's all about trying to figure out the best way to build that mousetrap and actually make some money. Of course, COVID's going to make all that more difficult, but we're going to get there, I promise. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it off to Stuart. Thank you guys for entertaining me.